Now, as we enter into our final segment, I think each of us who are followers of Christ know very well, we know personally, that God created each of us with inherent dignity. He made us in His image, but we also are keenly aware that the fall brought sin into each of us, into all of mankind, and quite frankly, absolute depravity is what it brought. And there are certainly times when that depravity is in full display, in all of its ugliness, and we are seeing that in the U.S. State Department's 2025 Trafficking in Persons report, a horrifying report where, quote, these are their words, where traffickers exploit and profit at the expense of adults or children by compelling them to perform labor or engage in commercial sex. Horrifying, absolute depravity. Truly a disturbing report to read, but it is important to shed light on this stuff. So joining me now to discuss this as well as other news of the week for our Biblical Worldview discussion is David Closson. He's the director of the Center for Biblical Worldview here at FRC. He's also the author of the recent book, Life After Roe, Equipping Christians in the Fight for Life Today. David, thanks as always for joining us for this Biblical Worldview segment.
It's great to be with you, Jody.
All right, we've got a lot to discuss. Before we jump into it, though, I know you literally just got back from Arkansas. Share with us real quickly what you were doing out there with the Biblical Worldview workshop.
Absolutely, Jody. So yesterday, my colleague Joseph Backham and I, in partnership with the Family Council in Arkansas, we did a one-day worldview workshop, and it was just wonderful. We did 8 kind of 45-minute sessions on topics ranging from abortion to critical theory to marriage, to kind of the state of worldview in the church in America. And it was a delight to be there. Over 100 pastors and ministry leaders, including several folks who came up to me and said they watch Washington Watch on a regular basis. So just a real joy to be there. And I would just say for listeners and viewers, if you're interested in learning more about our worldview workshops, you can go to frc.org/worldview, and there's actually an interest form because we're taking it on the road, and it's just a lot of fun.
Absolutely, and fantastic information that you guys bring forth. So thank you so much. All right, let's jump into some news if we can. I was just mentioning coming into this segment the disturbing report. The State Department released its annual Trafficking in Persons report. They identified 13 countries which have consistent patterns of human trafficking. So, David, why don't we begin there? Can you kind of walk us through the findings that came out of this report?
Yeah, Jody, I'd be happy to. I spent some time today going through the report that was really just released a day or two ago. And the top line number is that there are 17.4 million people around the world that are exploited for their labor. You see this in various industries. You see it in construction, agriculture, manufacturing, but that top line number of 17.4 million, of course, that's not uniformly spread over the globe. It's concentrated particularly in the 13 countries that were mentioned, China being the leader of that, but then Russia, Afghanistan, North Korea, Belarus, some typical kind of countries that you see. What was really just shocking to me is that 3.9 million people, according to the State Department, are exploited because of state-imposed forced labor. 3.9 million because, and many of them in China, so this would be Falun Gong practitioners, Uyghur Muslims, really those who are part of minority groups there in China. But across the world, 3.9 million people are being trafficked by state actors. And that's just alarming. One other top-line number, Jody, is that labor, by the way, results in $236 billion in illegal proceeds. And so, again, this is an absolute assault on human dignity, the fact that people are viewed as resources to be exploited rather than as the precious individuals that they are, made in God's image. This is something that should have the attention of really Christians, of course, but of all Americans, and I'm grateful the State Department is shining a bright light on this.
Well, I am too. It's just horrifying statistics here. So, David, this is our Biblical Worldview segment. So let's try to drive this home, if we can, specifically to Christians. Some of the takeaways that Christians need to hear about this, and certainly we need to pray for the freedom of these people, the release, for the entry of the gospel. But what would you say some of the biggest takeaways for Christians are here?
Yeah, a fundamental tenet of a Christian worldview, and I would say kind of a Christian anthropology, so how Christians understand humanity, is that we are made in the image of God, so that our worth, our dignity, our value is not bestowed upon us by a government. It's not bestowed upon us by the United Nations. It comes to us from God. Our dignity as human beings is inherent. And what trafficking does is really assaults that dignity. And I think that's important for us to realize. It assaults that dignity by reducing people made in God's images as really objects that can be exploited and mistreated and abused. The Bible, Proverbs 31, tells us as Christians, we're called to protect the vulnerable. And of course, as Christians, we know the whole reason that government exists is to promote good and to restrain evil. This is Romans 13. And I guess another thing that we should be aware of is something you said in your opening. This is just another kind of shining a light on the fact that we really do live in a Genesis 3 world. We live in a world that has been corroding under the effects of sin. Romans 8 tells us that creation itself groans under the weight of sin. And trafficking is fueled by greed, and it's fueled by lust. And so ultimately, at the root of this, Jody, it is a spiritual problem. And it's a spiritual problem that can only be remedied by the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I think as Christians read this report, these are some kind of theological principles and categories that are worth keeping in mind.
Wow. It is horrifying, and I just want to encourage. Do you know of a place, by the way, where people can see that report?
Yeah, Jody, it's listed on the State Department's website, and it went up right before the government shutdown. And so honestly, just a quick Google search of the annual human trafficking report, State Department, it should pull right up.
Okay. I want to encourage you to do that, those who are viewing and listening right now. And we've got to engage this thing through prayer and otherwise. David, thank you so much for giving us that perspective theologically, how we as Christians need to look at this. If I can switch gears with you, though, to another subject, the FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, really rather quietly, I think is the best way to say it, approved a generic version of the abortion pill mifepristone. And quite frankly, I think this caught a lot of people, myself included, by surprise. It did so just before the government shut down, by the way. But you've written a lot about chemical abortion in your book and so forth. What is your response to this development? I know this probably caught you off guard as well.
Yeah, Jody, and let me just preface this by saying, I'm someone who has praised and championed the Trump administration going back to the first administration as far as the approach they've taken for life. President Trump has used the bully pulpit of the presidency in his first term and at the second term to promote life. He's focused on it in his appointments. His policy prescriptions have largely moved in the direction that pro-life Christians would want to see. But we have talked about it. Jody, you and I have had this conversation that this administration can and must do more, specifically specifically on chemical abortion. It was just a week ago that Bobby Kennedy and the Health and Human Services Department announced, kind of confirmed really, that they were doing this safety review of mifepristone, the chemical abortion drug. And that's what's so, it just feels kind of like whiplash. They announced they're doing this safety review, and then they come out with this announcement that they've approved a generic version of basically the same pill. I think it was Josh Hawley the other day noted that even under the Biden administration, this application for this generic version of the drug was not approved, even though it had been sitting there for 4 years. And so there really is something about this that stinks. People talk about the deep state and bureaucrats. And so my encouragement is that Christians need to be really paying attention to this. My hope is that the Trump administration will reverse course, that President Trump will be made aware of this, that Bobby Kennedy will be made aware of this, because chemical abortion, again, Jody, accounts for 63% of the abortions that take place in this country. These pills are always lethal for babies. They're also dangerous for women who take them. The FDA has always admitted this, but this spring we learned these pills are much more lethal than we even realized. And so this is, we need more information about this, but this is something that has surprised a lot of pro-lifers, and it's something the administration needs to walk back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so grateful you brought that up. And Josh Hawley, you brought him up. I think he said, and correct me if I'm a little bit off, but I believe it was somewhere in the ballpark of 1 out of 10 women who take this drug end up with serious health complications, many of whom end up in the emergency rooms. And yet we are also watching how this abortion drug is impacting pro-life states because the drug is being shipped across these states and causing people really to violate the laws of their individual states. So there's so much to deal with here that Christians need to be engaged in this whole process. David, finally, I want to ask you a Gallup survey showing that trust in the media has fallen to an all-time low. In fact, 28% of Americans say that they trust the media, and the numbers are even lower among Republicans. What's your take on these findings? How should a biblical worldview shape the way that we think about the media and truth?
Yeah, Jody, the number for Republicans who trust the media is actually 8%. So again, it's incredibly low. Even Democrats who are more prone to trust the media, whether this is television or print, I think it's at 51%. I think the perception is out there, especially amongst Republicans, that the media basically exists to help elect Democrats and hurt Donald Trump. And I think there's probably some truth to that narrative. You asked, though, Jody, about a biblical perspective. And I think for Christians, we care about this issue because truth matters. We're the people that care about truth. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 25 tells us to put away falsehood and to speak the truth. Christians are people who love the truth. We live by the truth. We want to point people to truth. And the media kind of ecosystem that we live in is not one that kind of really tells the truth in many situations. We could point to so many different stories. And so again, my encouragement to Christians is we need to be discerning consumers when it comes to media. That's why FRC launched the Washington Stand to provide trustworthy news from a biblical worldview. And finally, we should model this integrity even in our own conversations and the way we share news, whether that's on social media or in conversations. But ultimately, Jody, as Christians, we are people of the truth, which is why we care about it.
Absolutely. David Closson, Director of FRC's Center for Biblical Worldview, as always, thank you so much.